Never in human history have we actually faced such a pressing problem as today. Climate change is real, and the global community has embarked on a very ambitious energy transition. Now, to get a sense of the scale of the problem and what's at stake, I'm joined by Angela Wilkinson. She is the Secretary General of the World Energy Council. Angela, congratulations on your council turning 100 this year. Your founder, David Dunlop, he must have been quite a visionary to imagine that, today we'd be having these problems with the climate.
Well, yes, the World Energy Council was formed in 1923 by visionary leaders who wanted to think about how could we develop energy resources for peace in those days. Now, today we're in an era of energy transition for people and planet. And while some of the challenges are the same, many billions of people across the world still lack access to sufficient modern energy resources. We also have the added challenge of global climate change to deal with.
Okay, so there's much anticipation at the upcoming UN Climate Change Summit, COP28. The UN has already warned that it's not going to be meeting its, targets in cutting greenhouse gases. What's your assessment of the pace of transition?
So we know that multiple energy transitions are unfolding along increasingly diverse technology pathways in all regions, but none of them are going fast enough to avoid an overshoot of 1.5 degrees centigrade. So we need to develop more energy because actually our energy system is still growing. We need to increase the amount of renewables, but we also need to decarbonise oil and gas and coal. We can't just focus on renewable power systems. They won't grow fast enough to meet the challenges of more demand and a healthier planet. So we need to move faster, fairer and more far-reaching so that we have 10 billion better lives on a healthy planet. So for COP28, this is a challenge of not can we set strict targets, but can we close the implementation gap?
Okay. Where do you think there's a chance to catch up, as it were? Is it the hyper-focus on hydrogen and other renewable sources?
So we need to pull on all levers. We've got to remember we can't just reduce emissions anymore. We've got to think about climate adaptation, carbon removal and climate repair if we really want to have a safe operating future for all of humanity. So yes, we have to increase solar and wind power, and those are increasingly cheap generation technologies, but you can't just rely on producing more supply. You've also got to get that supply to where the demand is, and that means you've got to invest in infrastructures. And those new infrastructures, as well as existing infrastructures for electrons and molecules, and that's why there's a role for decarbonising oil and gas. Then we have a new energy vector, global hydrogen, and we will need low carbon hydrogen from many different production technologies and many different supply centres to meet global demand.
Okay. Your council's raison d'etre is to develop how-to solutions and then convene in a global energy community setting and then to try common ground to cooperate, right? So you've talked about humanizing the energy transition. How do you do that?
So an energy transition isn't for the future of the energy industry. It's for the future of connected and diverse modern energy societies. And we can't just rely on the push of finance and technology innovation. We've got to have the pull of societies. So we need to involve billions more people and diverse place-based communities in this transition. After all, they're the energy users of the future. So that's why humanizing energy is important. We need to help more people and place-based communities understand their role and use their choices to accelerate this transition.
But given today's uncertain geopolitical climate and slowing economic growth, is it difficult, this task that you're asking people to do?
Well, I think if you think that governments deal with governments and businesses deal with businesses and neither of them respond actually to the needs of society, that's just not the reality. The reality is somebody's got to pay for this transition. They've got to be willing to pay for it and they've got to be able to pay for it. So like it or not, if we don't include more people and place-based communities in this, the question is who will pay for this transition?
You've also said that the green energy transition, there's no one-size-fits-all model. that people must be vested in their interests, and that the polarizing rhetoric must be toned down. Are you seeing some progress in this respect?
I see a marked change here at Singapore International Energy Week compared with last year. Even in the opening remarks here, I'm seeing a recognition that it's not all about just tripling the amount of renewables by 2050. We've also got to increase energy efficiency, a demand-side measure. And to get to 3 times the amount of renewables, we're also going to have to decarbonise other energies and clean materials. What the geopolitics says today is that there's increasing competition and concern about critical supply chains and about the materiality of the renewables energy revolution. And so we've got to think about how much energy do we need to mine to produce the steel and the concrete that's needed for the new renewable system. And so there's a lot more conversation here today about repurposing existing energy systems, not just building new, but repurposing pipelines for hydrogen, repurposing coal-fired power plants with biofuels. And I think that makes for a much more inclusive and least cost transition.
Getting renewables to scale means taking a lot of mining of critical minerals, lithium, nickel, rare earth elements. That's something that's not been in focus as much as you say. This rivalry between the US and China in terms of has created this focus on this supply chain of essential minerals. Would you say this so-called green nationalism is going to impede this transition?
Well, we tend to talk about the new green technology arms race. And the rivalry between the US and China is on 2 fronts. First of all, it's about how do we get the critical minerals and materials that we need to accelerate the security of our clean energy transitions, but it's also on the other side around the development of the digital economy. Digitization itself requires a lot more energy and materials. So if you really want to have digital growth as well as industrial growth, you need more access to energy for sustainable development. And so you could say it's really an energy rivalry.
Okay. A final question. Let's talk about energy security. It's security, it's affordability, it's sustainability. In this part of the region, where are the main hurdles to this?
So we talk about the World Energy Trilemma framework, that you have to manage energy security alongside affordability and equity and environmental sustainability. And in this part of the world, we have to remember that environmental sustainability doesn't just mean carbon dioxide emissions reduction, it also means forestry protection, food systems and agricultural systems in that sustainability portfolio. It means closing the modern access gap. There's been huge progress in closing the gap to basic electricity, but billions of people still lack heating, the energy for industrial development, as well as clean cooking. So the biggest gaps in this part of the world, the priorities tend to be about access and a broader agenda for sustainability than just the climate and energy security agenda of the rest of the world.
Okay, but overall, you're still positive.
I think realistic hope is in action, and we're all about action.
Okay, that's great. Angela, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure to speak with you.
And that was Angela Wilkinson. She is the Secretary General of the World Energy Council.